It's a month of March, and this month of March we will be discussing about understanding the fellowship between man and God. Between man and God, what are we before God and what is God before us? Why do we need to have a fellowship, worship, and just be with God? And that's our main idea, because our theme for the year is to know Thee more clearly, love Thee more dearly, and to follow Thee more nearly. And fellowship and being close to God or being like God is an important facet or important thing that we need to know so that we may achieve these three important things that we have for today. But to have fellowship with God, the most important thing to begin with is to know what is a man, what is the image of God. I know to many of us this would be a redundant thing that we keep on hammering. If you notice, this is one of my favorite theological subject about the image of God, because when you understand what man is all about, it changes a lot of perception that we have here on earth. And so even in our Christian life, even in understanding discipleship, even in understanding many things about relationship, the doctrines or the study of the image of God is very, very important. And so I would like to begin again on that matter. As I was remembering in one of my course when I was studying in a seminary, we have a subject called cultural anthropology, and it's basically talking about the various behavior and culture of man. And in that one of those particular book, they talk about a lot of unique ways of living life. And one of the unique tribes that I remember is, I completely forgot the name of the tribe, but it is a tribe down in Africa. And for the members of this community in Africa, for them to be beautiful is to put a bone in their nose. So they put a bone in the nose, so like that. And for them that is beautiful, and that bone to be different, and they change it, and even some are big, some are small. But everybody has to have that. And if you ask them why, because they believe that their forefathers were the boars or the pigs. The wild pigs, that's their forefathers, so they don't touch it. And for them, they came from that wild boars, so that they follow it by putting a bone here and a tusk, just like the pig. And we may laugh at it, but in this modern day age, I remember as well, when I was in the UAE, there were a lot of people who came to the Lord, but before they came to the Lord, a lot of them looks funny. I remember there was one lady who had painted her hair to look like a lion. Okay? There was another man who painted her hair violet, etc., etc., and all of these things. And if you ask them, why did you do that? Well, because that's the image that they like. Now, sometimes it's interesting. Why do you have to look like, first of all, an animal? And today, even there is this, what we call the emo. Emo, is that young people? The emos. And they paint themselves with black. They wear black. They put black shadow in their eyes. And they simply look like ghosts. And the more they look like ghosts, the more they are in. In other words, sometimes in this modern day and age, people have a lot of confusion about what man is. What are we to copy? Some people copy and behave like animals. Like, for example, promiscuity with sex, having a liberal understanding about sex, is basically an animalistic instinct. When you don't find any moral obligation in indulging with sexual activity, it's basically an animalistic tendency. And people will stand for that because they say this is what we are. And today I would like us to understand that as a human being, we are not animals. Though we have the property or the characteristic, what they call Homo sapien, the highest form of an animal, but we are not basically an animal. We are special people, and we were created in the image of God. And that's what I would like to talk about. There are several scriptures that I would like to begin with. First of all, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 to 27, I know many of us are familiar with this. Let us make man in our image and in our likeness. And then if you follow that verse, it says, so God created man in His own image, not in the image of an elephant, not in the image of an angel, but in His own image. In the image of God, He created him, male and female, He created them. So if you notice here, immediately from the first book of the Bible, it's telling us that human beings are special creation. You and me were created in the image of God. No matter how you look at the mirror and try to compare yourself with the most beautiful women or actresses in this earth, you are still created in the image of God. No matter how we look, we were created in the image of God. And if you jump in the New Testament, this is the same echo. This is basically the meaning of salvation. In Romans 8 verse 29, it is said, For those God foreknew, He also predestined to be what? To be conformed to the likeness of His Son, that He might be the firstborn among brothers. We are to become like Jesus. Why? Because Jesus is the one who was able, who the Bible also proclaimed, He is the image of the invisible God. In 2 Corinthians chapter 3 verse 18, it also says, And we who with unveiled faces all reflect the Lord's glory are being transformed into His likeness with ever-increasing glory which comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. So, in the beginning, the Bible tells us that man was created in the image and likeness of God. And then if you jump in the New Testament, after the work of Christ, after Jesus died on the cross and have gathered people who are being saved, the Bible keeps on telling that these people are being transformed from glory to glory in the image of God. So in other words, to be the image of God is not just a topic that needs to be discussed, but it is very important in determining our dignity, our uniqueness, our responsibility, and our outlook of life. To be created in the image of God. But then the question normally would ask is, what does it mean to be the image and likeness of God? What does it mean to be the image and likeness of God? Some theologians in the early days, they said to have the same form and substance, which means you have a living soul, you have the spirit, and then that spirit and that soul is a substance from God, and so therefore you are created in the image. They would even say that the animals do not have soul, the animals do not have a spirit, and it's only mankind. So based on that, we were created in the image and likeness of God. In the form, that's why in the Bible we have what we call anthropomorphism, wherein people in the early days would see God, and the only way they could describe God is as if He's a human being. He talks, He walks, and so therefore we say this is what we are. So some even say that God have a nose. Did you see that in the painting? God the Father have white hair, majestic, because we try to portray that since we have nose, God have a nose. That's the way we understand, or some people try to understand. In Psalm 8 verse 6, it says, to be like God is to be given the dominion of God, to be the representative of God here on earth. God entrusted to man. What is man that you're mindful of him, the Son of Man, that you care for him? The psalmist say in Psalm 8, and that you've given him dominion over all creation. So some theologians say to be the image of God is to take care of the dominion of God. We are not saying this is wrong, but this is part perhaps of all this being in the image and likeness of God. Some say, especially in modern day Christianity today, to be in the image of God, that's why we are called sons of God, is to have the power of God. So many believe today by saying a word, things will happen because I am a child of God. If God say by His word the world was created, by word and positive thinking, things will happen. It means to have the power of God, to be like God. Is this the meaning of the image and likeness of God? And so, what is important for us to do today is to understand what the writers of the book of Genesis would like us really to say, to understand in what they call the image and likeness of God. First of all, just to prepare our hearts to understand, the book of Genesis was written in Hebrew. And not the modern Hebrew today, but it is the ancient Hebrew. And one thing that we need to understand, the language of the Hebrew and the way they look at things is not the way we look in this modern day and age. In other words, their mindset, when they look at concept, it's totally different from what we think of concept. And one of these is like, for example, for us, modern day, we are so interested with forms, the shape. So when you look at the building, what impresses you with the building? It is the shape, the architectural beauty, isn't it? That's us. That's why when we look at women, and men looking at women, women looking at men, what do you look for? The shape, the form, whether it's handsome or beautiful. We are in the modern days, and that's the way we look. Now, in the ancient times, when they talk about beauty, they don't look at the shape. They look at the content. So when they say the house is beautiful, they are not looking at the architecture. They're looking at the material. Okay? That's why if you notice in the book of Exodus or in the book of Leviticus, when they try to describe the Ark of the Covenant, you notice that the writer is only talking about the stones, the wood, everything that was going to be used. Because for them, that is more important. Architecture in those days are just simply boxes. There are no beautiful curvatures that they do. What is important is the material. Now, even in the use of verb, as I was sharing this to Rosana, for us, the word, when we talk about the word verb, this means the action word. Let's say, to stand. To stand. For us, when we say, he is standing there, when you close your eyes, what do you picture? You picture a man who is just standing there. Now, when you talk about the Hebrew verbs in the olden days, when they say, he is standing there, it's not a man that is just standing. But the visualization of the writer is that this man is standing, but before that, he was lying down, or he was not there. And so there is an action that happened for him to be there. That's for us, that's hard to visualize, isn't it? But that's the way they use verb. It's always a process. It's not just to go. It does not mean you just go. But it is a complete story. So when you talk about God created man in His image, we must remember that when God said created, the Bible created, it does not mean, that's it. It means there is a process that is going to happen. Okay? Remember, this is the original scripture is written in that language, not in the English language. And so the uses of verbs are totally different. So first of all, when we talk about to be the image and likeness of God, it simply means to reflect the personal being of God. To be. God created man to be like Him. So the verb to be, in other words, it is an ongoing thing to be. And what? To become like Him. So this is what I would like for us to discuss today. That the image of God is not about the form and substance, although it may consist like that. It is not just simply about dominion, although that's part of it. It may not only be the sharing of power, but when it comes to the Hebrew writer, the meaning of the image and likeness of God is to reflect the personal being of God. Which means to act as God would act, to deal as God would deal, and to carry into effect as God does. I will explain that later. And then, I don't think we will have time, but this would be carried over to what we will discuss next week. To be the image and likeness of God, therefore, requires a dynamic process of continuous fellowship, relationship, and oneness with God.